The polished surface of the mahogany conference table reflected the light, casting faint shadows in the room. As I sat there, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on my chest, I could hardly keep my eyes from darting to the seat at the head of the table. Ethan was already there, lounging comfortably in our father's old chair. He wore the air of someone who had already claimed his victory, even before the will had been read. His face was unreadable, but his body language, so confident, so sure, told a different story. Our father, a man whose ideals had shaped my entire life, was gone. The man who had built Watson Enterprises from the ground up, a legacy of integrity and hard work, was now nothing more than a memory. And now, we were about to find out how that legacy would be passed down. The room was filled with silence, a heavy, suffocating quiet that seemed to amplify the low hum of the air conditioning. My hands, folded tightly in my lap, clenched around the edges of my skirt. I wasn't sure if it was the shock of what was happening or the sense of betrayal that had lodged itself deep in my chest. I had prepared myself for this moment, but nothing could have fully prepared me for the sense of helplessness that washed over me. "To my son, Ethan Watson," the lawyer, Mr. Reed, began, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of sorrow. He adjusted his glasses, as if trying to steady his own emotions. "I leave full control of Watson Enterprises, including all assets, properties, and patents. He shall assume the role of CEO, with all executive authority, effective immediately." Ethan didn't even blink. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips, as though he had already won, as though this moment was nothing more than a formality. I had always known he was the golden child in our father's eyes, the one who could do no wrong. I had spent years building the marketing division, pouring my heart and soul into it, growing it into a driving force that generated a significant portion of the company's revenue. Yet here I was, the one left behind, left with nothing but the small corner of the company I had built, as Ethan prepared to take it all. "To my daughter, Sarah Watson," Mr. Reed continued, glancing at me for the briefest of moments. I could feel the weight of his eyes, the almost apologetic look he gave me. It wasn't his fault. This was my father's doing. "I leave the marketing division of Watson Enterprises, with my hopes that she will continue to grow it, as she has these past 5 years. 5 years. That was all I had received. 5 years of my blood, sweat, and tears. And now I was left to watch Ethan, who had contributed nothing, take control of the entire empire our father had built. I fought to keep my face neutral, to suppress the rage that threatened to burst free. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to relax. I wouldn't let him see me break, not now, not ever. But inside, a storm was brewing, one that I had no idea how to contain. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lash out at him, to expose him for what he was. A man who had always been handed everything, who had never had to work for anything, and who had always used our father's love to manipulate the situation. He had never cared about the company. He had never cared about the values our father instilled in us. All he cared about was winning. The lawyer continued, reading through the will, but I couldn't hear the words. They were a blur, the finality of it, the way Ethan had already assumed his role. It all felt too surreal. I had been overlooked, dismissed. As Mr. Reed finished reading, he folded the document and set it aside. There was a pause, a moment of quiet that seemed to stretch on forever. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me. Then I spoke. The words slipped out before I had a chance to think about them. "I'd like to see the original will." There was a flicker of surprise on Ethan's face, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of indifference. "That's irrelevant, Sarah," he said, his tone laced with condescension. "This is the current will." But I wasn't about to let him off so easily. "I insist," I said, my voice steady despite the anger boiling inside me. "I have every right to see the original will." I could see the flicker of uncertainty in Ethan's eyes, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. Mr. Reed, to his credit, didn't hesitate. He reached for another folder, this one slightly more worn than the first. The air around us seemed to shift, the tension thickening as he passed the original document to me. I had no idea what I was about to find, but I knew, deep down, that this was my only chance to uncover the truth. My father, I knew, had always been strategic, always thinking ahead. If he had left me something, anything, it was because he had a plan, and I wasn't going to let Ethan, or anyone else, take that from me. As I scanned the pages, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The ink on the paper was faint, but the words were unmistakable. There it was, proof that our father had planned for me, that he had seen what was coming. My heart pounded in my chest as I read through the document, the meaning sinking in. He hadn't left me nothing, far from it. My father had transferred several patents to me, patents that were far more valuable than anything Ethan could ever imagine. And what's more, he had restructured the marketing division, turning it into an independent subsidiary, complete with its own board and full development rights. It wasn't just marketing anymore, it was an entirely new entity, one that Ethan had overlooked. I looked up at Ethan, who was watching me closely. The smirk was gone now, replaced by something darker. Fear, perhaps. Or was it frustration? It didn't matter. He had underestimated me, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. "I'd like copies of both versions," I said, my voice even, but with a steel edge that I hadn't known I possessed. "Planning to contest the will?" Ethan asked, his tone sharp, though his smile didn't return. I met his gaze evenly. "Just being thorough. Dad taught us that, remember?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he simply sat back, the smugness fading from his expression. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time, I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The next few days passed in a blur. I spent every waking moment poring over the documents, consulting with lawyers, and assembling a team to help me with the next steps. I wasn't about to let Ethan walk away with everything, not without a fight. As I worked, a plan began to form. My father had left me a legacy, one that Ethan would never be able to see or understand. I wasn't just going to play by the rules. No, I was going to redefine the game. It was time to show Ethan that he had underestimated me. It was time to take control of my future. The weight of my father's will settled heavily on me in the days that followed the reading. Ethan had his victory, and I was left with a small piece of what I had helped build. But deep inside me, a quiet resolve began to stir. My father's plan was more than just about a division or a company. It was about something greater. The marketing division he had left me, I knew, wasn't just a division. It was a foundation for something bigger, something I hadn't fully realized until now. I spent sleepless nights going over every document I could find, cross-referencing them with the original will. It wasn't just about taking the marketing division and moving on. It was about the larger picture. My father had left me something Ethan would never have noticed, because he had never been interested in the finer details. I was the one who had always cared, always thought long-term. But even I had missed the full scope of my father's vision. It was Isabel who helped me see it. She had been my assistant for years, someone I trusted completely. I knew she had an eye for detail that was unmatched, and as we sat together late one night in my office, I saw it. The key to everything. "Sarah," she said quietly, breaking the silence that had stretched on for what felt like hours. "Look at this." I leaned over her shoulder, my eyes narrowing as she pointed to a series of patent documents. They were pages upon pages of legal jargon, but buried in those documents were ideas that could change everything. I felt my heart race as I read through them. These weren't just patents for simple products. They were innovations, groundbreaking technologies that could revolutionize the industry. "My father transferred these to me personally," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "He gave them to me before everything changed, before Ethan even knew what was happening." Ethan had always been too focused on the high-level view, the glamour of being the CEO, to care about the real work, the foundations upon which the company was built. He had never cared about the smaller details, the patents, the technologies. He had always dismissed marketing as just an afterthought, something secondary to the real business. But my father had known. He had seen Ethan for what he was, and he had planned accordingly. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. My father had structured the marketing division not just as a division, but as its own independent entity. He had given me full rights to develop these patents, to build something new. He had created a company within a company, one that Ethan had overlooked entirely. It was all there in the documents, an independent subsidiary, its own board, its own assets. It was a goldmine of potential, one that Ethan would never have thought to investigate. And so, with this new understanding, I set to work. I wasn't going to waste time mourning the inheritance I hadn't gotten. I wasn't going to let Ethan take everything without a fight. I knew what I had to do, and now I had the tools to do it. The first step was simple. I had to protect what my father had given me. These patents weren't just papers. They were a foundation, the building blocks for a future that Ethan couldn't touch. I spent hours in meetings with lawyers, ensuring that the patents were legally transferred to my name, ensuring that they were secure from any further tampering. I had to make sure they couldn't be taken from me, that no one could claim them as their own. But securing the patents was just the beginning. The real work was in what came next. The strategy. My father had given me everything I needed to create something new, something that would not only honor his legacy, but surpass it. The marketing division that Ethan had so casually dismissed was now my launchpad, and I had a vision that I wasn't going to let anyone stop. In the days that followed, I began assembling a team, some old colleagues, others new. But all of them were people I could trust, people who believed in what I was trying to build. We worked late into the nights, sometimes in silence, sometimes exchanging excited ideas. I felt the spark of innovation fill the room as we began to design the future of what would become Watson Technologies. It was a company built on the patents my father had left me, but it was more than that. It was my vision, my creation, a fresh start. But even as we worked tirelessly, I knew Ethan wouldn't just let me have this. He wouldn't accept that he had overlooked something so vital, so powerful. I had seen the way his eyes had narrowed when I asked for the original will, the way his demeanor had shifted when I started digging into the past. He wasn't going to take kindly to being outsmarted, and I knew he would eventually realize the treasure trove of opportunity he had left behind. And so, I watched him. I kept my eyes on every move he made, listening carefully to the rumors that floated around the company. Ethan had already started making changes. He was pushing through corporate restructuring, installing his own people in key positions, dismantling the ethical guidelines that had always been a part of our father's vision. He was trying to make his mark on the company, to erase any trace of what our father had built in favor of his own plans. But as I watched him, I realized something else. Ethan wasn't just taking control of the company, he was actively sabotaging it. I had been so focused on my own work that I hadn't seen it before, but now it was glaringly obvious. He had been siphoning resources from the company, funneling money into personal projects and schemes that only benefited him. There were records, emails, and financial transactions that clearly indicated he had been setting himself up for this moment for years. He had been using the company's resources to build his own empire, to set the stage for his takeover. It was then that I knew. I couldn't just fight for what was mine. I had to expose him. I had to make sure that everyone saw Ethan for what he truly was. A man who had used our father's death as a stepping stone to fulfill his own ambitions. A man who had no respect for the company, for the legacy our father had worked so hard to build. I began gathering evidence. It wasn't easy. I had to be careful, subtle. Ethan had become suspicious of my actions, and I knew he was keeping a close eye on me. But with Isabel's help, we pieced together the puzzle. We found witness statements from the hospital where our father had spent his final days. Nurses who had been there, who had seen how Ethan pressured our father into making decisions, who had seen the toll it took on him. I gathered financial documents, proof that Ethan had been funneling money into personal accounts, that he had been systematically undermining the company for years. Every day, I grew more determined. Every document, every piece of evidence brought me closer to the truth. And with that truth, I would expose Ethan. I would show him that I wasn't the helpless sister he thought I was. I wasn't the one who had been left behind. No, I was the one who had been given the tools to build something greater than he could ever imagine. I wasn't just fighting for a division of a company. I was fighting for my father's legacy, for the future that he had planned for me, and for the future that I would create on my own terms. I was ready to take on whatever came next, ready to show Ethan that he had made a grave mistake underestimating me. The day I had been preparing for, working toward, and dreading was finally here. The conference room was bustling with anticipation as executives, board members, and journalists gathered for what Ethan had been touting as the next big step for Watson Enterprises. His deal with Apex Technologies was about to be announced, and with it, the promise of a new era under his leadership. I sat quietly at the back of the room, my gaze fixed on Ethan as he stood at the podium, the smile on his face one of pure triumph. He had no idea what was coming. I had watched him long enough to know the subtle arrogance in his demeanor. He carried himself like he was already untouchable, as though nothing could stand in his way now that he had control of the company. But what he didn't know, what he could never have predicted, was that I was no longer the sister he could dismiss, the one who had been left behind with nothing but scraps. I had built something he had overlooked, and today, I was going to show him that I had the last word. As Ethan spoke, his voice confident, almost smug, I couldn't help but feel a cold sense of detachment. He spoke about the future of Watson Enterprises, how the partnership with Apex would streamline operations and maximize shareholder value. He droned on about efficiencies, profits, and corporate growth, but all I could hear was the hollow sound of his words. He wasn't talking about the company that our father had built. He wasn't talking about integrity or legacy. He was talking about a deal, a transaction, a way to line his pockets. And I had had enough. The moment finally arrived. Ethan looked at the crowd, his hand raised in a gesture that felt like an invitation to applause. But I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes as I stood up, slowly and deliberately, interrupting his speech. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward me. For a brief moment, I felt the weight of the moment, but there was no hesitation in my heart. This was my moment, and it wasn't just about me. It was about everything my father had worked for, everything he had believed in. It was about making sure that the legacy I had been given was not only protected, but honored in a way that Ethan never could. "Actually, I have an announcement of my own," I said, my voice calm but steady. The room was still, the air thick with anticipation, as I walked toward the front, the weight of my father's legacy pressing down on my shoulders. I could feel the eyes of everyone in that room, but I wasn't nervous. I wasn't intimidated. I was ready. Ethan's face twisted in surprise, but it was quickly replaced by the mask of composure he had worn throughout the meeting. "This isn't the time for this, Sarah," he said, his voice laced with irritation, trying to assert control over a moment he thought was his to command. But I wasn't going to let him take it from me. "Actually," I continued, "it's exactly the time for this." I gestured toward Isabel, who was standing by the door, a tablet in hand. She stepped forward and began distributing folders to everyone in the room. As the first few board members opened their folders, I watched their faces change from curiosity to shock. The room was filled with whispers, the atmosphere shifting as they saw what I had prepared. "These patents," I said, letting the words hang in the air, "are not part of Watson Enterprises, at least not in the way you've been led to believe." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "These patents, the ones you've been so eager to sell to Apex, they belong to me, not to Watson Enterprises. Not to you, Ethan. They belong to Watson Technologies." A gasp rippled through the room. Ethan's face turned from pale to red, his usual composure unraveling in an instant. He had always been so sure of himself, so confident that everything was falling into place for him. But now I could see it. the uncertainty, the fear creeping in. He hadn't seen this coming. He hadn't even known what he had overlooked. I continued, my voice strong and clear. My father transferred these patents to me before his death, and he left them to me for a reason. You, Ethan, never bothered to look into the fine details, the things that really mattered. You were too busy playing CEO, too busy thinking you had it all figured out. But I was paying attention. I was looking at the bigger picture. I watched as Ethan struggled to maintain his composure, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something to hold on to. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. It was as if he was being exposed for the first time, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around him. I could see the realization dawning on him, the full weight of what I had just said sinking in. The patents, the technologies that could change the industry, were mine. I had not just inherited a division. I had inherited the future of Watson Enterprises, the future he had never bothered to understand. The press, now fully engaged, began furiously scribbling down notes, their cameras flashing as they captured the moment. The board members, who had once looked at me with indifference, were now looking at me with a mixture of surprise and awe. Ethan's supporters, the ones he had placed in key positions, looked confused, as though the ground had been pulled out from under them. "Sarah, this isn't possible," Ethan finally said, his voice strained, his attempt to regain control slipping through his fingers. "I have controlling interest in all intellectual property. I have the authority. This isn't yours to claim." I stepped forward, my gaze unwavering. "Actually, Ethan, you don't have control over what you never bothered to investigate. These patents were transferred to me months before you even considered merging with Apex. They weren't part of Watson Enterprises. They were part of something new, something you refused to acknowledge." Ethan's face went ashen as the room erupted into murmurs. The journalists were taking pictures, the board members whispering among themselves. I could see the weight of the evidence, the years of mismanagement and manipulation, unfolding before their eyes. The financial records I had gathered, the shell companies Ethan had set up, the way he had been siphoning funds from Watson Enterprises for years. It was all there, laid out for everyone to see. I didn't stop there. "And that's not all," I continued, turning to the crowd with confidence. "We also have evidence that shows how Ethan manipulated our father's health in his final days. The doctors are very interested in reviewing the medical records, especially the changes that were made to his medication in those final days." Ethan lurched forward, his face twisted in rage. "You can't do this!" he shouted. But before he could move any further, security stepped forward, their presence immediate and unquestionable. As Ethan was escorted out of the room, his face a mixture of fury and disbelief, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I had exposed him for what he truly was, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not just my father's legacy, but my future. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles, investigations, and revelations. Ethan was placed on administrative leave, and the investigation into his financial manipulations began in earnest. Apex Technologies, seeing the massive missteps in their potential merger, withdrew their offer, and the board of Watson Enterprises, now fully aware of the damage Ethan had caused, began to shift its allegiance. It wasn't long before they approached me, offering me the position I had always deserved, the role of CEO of Watson Enterprises. But I didn't want Watson Enterprises. Not anymore. That company, under Ethan's mismanagement, had become something unrecognizable. I didn't need it. What I had built, what my father had set me up to create, was bigger. Watson Technologies, the company I had founded with the patents my father had left me, was the future. As I stood at the helm of Watson Technologies, watching the first product we had developed using those patents go into production, I knew that I was honoring my father's legacy in the truest sense. I wasn't just continuing his work, I was building on it, making it my own. The future was mine to shape, and I would not let anyone take that from me. Later that evening, I stood by my father's grave, the weight of the day heavy on my shoulders. I placed a model of our first product beside his headstone, a symbol of the new legacy I had created. I whispered softly, "You were right, Dad. You knew what needed to be done. You gave me everything I needed to succeed. And now, I've built something worthy of your vision." For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I had done it. And I had done it on my own terms. The journey of Sarah Watson, a determined woman who found herself fighting for her rightful place in her family's empire, is one of resilience, intelligence, and profound personal growth. When Sarah's father passed away, she was left with what seemed to be nothing more than a small corner of their family's business, just a division that many, including her own brother Ethan, dismissed as insignificant. Ethan, her older brother, was the one who was handed the reins, not because he was more capable or had worked harder, but simply because he had manipulated circumstances to suit his desires. As Sarah sat in the conference room, listening to their father's will, it felt like the end of her role in the family business, the end of everything she had worked for. Yet, what Sarah didn't know at the time was that her father's plan was far more intricate than she could have imagined. Beneath the surface of what seemed like a crushing defeat was a blueprint for success, a hidden legacy built on the very foundations she had spent years nurturing. In the days following the will reading, Sarah began to uncover the truth. Her father had seen her potential all along. He had entrusted her with far more than a marketing division. He had left her groundbreaking patents and the ability to build something entirely new. Sarah's journey from disbelief to empowerment was marked by her resilience, her unwavering belief in her own ability, and her determination to protect the legacy her father had intended for her. As the story progressed, Sarah's sense of purpose deepened. She refused to let her brother Ethan's manipulation and arrogance define her future. Instead of succumbing to bitterness or playing the victim, she dug deep into the details, uncovering evidence of Ethan's corporate sabotage, his underhanded dealings, and his complete disregard for the company's true values. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah took action, securing the patents her father had left her and using them to build Watson Technologies, a company not only destined to outshine Watson Enterprises under Ethan's leadership, but to create a new legacy built on integrity and innovation. The final showdown came when Sarah, equipped with irrefutable evidence and her own vision, stood before Ethan, her family's board, and the press. She revealed that Ethan had overlooked the very thing that would have kept him at the top, the foundation of the business, the heart of what made their company great. She exposed his wrongdoings, his manipulation of their father's final days, and his disregard for the company's legacy. Ethan's world crumbled, and Sarah took control of her destiny. She didn't just win the battle, she redefined the narrative, forging a path forward that was uniquely her own. What stands out most in Sarah's journey is her ability to recognize the bigger picture, her capacity to pivot in the face of adversity, and her refusal to accept mediocrity. Her resilience in the face of betrayal and her unwavering commitment to her father's values are what ultimately led her to success. Sarah's story isn't just one of business acumen, it's about strength of character, about believing in yourself even when others don't, and about refusing to let anyone, not even family, take away what you've worked for. There is an important lesson to be learned from Sarah's story. Success isn't always handed to you, and sometimes the most significant battles are the ones you fight for your legacy. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the world is against you, that the cards are stacked in favor of others. Sarah could have easily let herself be consumed by jealousy or anger at the unfairness of it all. She could have given up, accepted what was left for her, and quietly faded into the background. But instead, she chose to dig deeper, to explore what was hidden beneath the surface, and to take control of her destiny. She understood that true success is not just about inheriting what others leave behind, but about building something new, something that stands on your own merits. In life, we often face situations where things don't go as planned. We might feel overlooked, undervalued, or cheated. But like Sarah, it's crucial to remember that these challenges are not the end. They are opportunities in disguise. When faced with adversity, rather than retreating or letting it defeat you, take a step back and look for the hidden opportunities. What can you learn from the situation? What strengths can you tap into that you might not have realized were there? Success comes to those who understand that obstacles are not roadblocks, but stepping stones to something greater. Like Sarah, you too can use the challenges you face as opportunities to uncover your true potential. Sarah's story also teaches us the importance of persistence. When the world seems stacked against us, it's easy to feel like giving up is the only option. But as Sarah demonstrated, success is often built on the foundation of perseverance. She didn't let her brother's manipulations or the betrayal of those closest to her derail her. She fought for what was hers, but more importantly, she built something better. A company that wasn't just about profits, but about integrity and making a difference. In our own lives, we can apply this lesson by embracing the idea of perseverance. When the road gets tough, when obstacles seem insurmountable, remember that you have the power to choose how you respond. You can choose to give up, or you can choose to dig deeper, to keep pushing forward, and to find new solutions to old problems. Sarah's ability to stay focused on her goals and her refusal to settle for anything less than what she deserved is something we can all take to heart. No matter how impossible the situation seems, remember that persistence, paired with resilience, can lead to success in the end. Finally, Sarah's journey teaches us about the importance of legacy, both the legacy we inherit and the one we create for ourselves. We often think of legacy as something left behind by others, but as Sarah's story shows, legacy is something we build every day through our actions, decisions, and how we choose to live our lives. Your legacy isn't just about what you inherit from those who came before you, but about what you leave behind for the generations to come. Sarah took the legacy her father gave her and made it her own, building something that was greater than just a business. She built a company that reflected her values, her vision, and her character. For all of us, the question is, what kind of legacy do we want to create? Are we living in a way that honors the legacy of those who came before us? And what will we leave behind when we're gone? As we reflect on Sarah's story, I encourage you to think about your own legacy. How can you build something that reflects your true values, that leaves a positive impact on those around you? What are the steps you can take today to ensure that your legacy is one of strength, resilience, and integrity? If Sarah's story resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of perseverance, self-belief, and building a meaningful legacy, I invite you to join this community. Subscribe to the channel and support us as we continue to create content that inspires, motivates, and empowers you to be your best self. Together, we can share these powerful lessons and continue to grow. Let's build something extraordinary, just like Sarah did. Subscribe now and be part of the journey.